great idea.
Good idea.
Thank you
Great
very
idea.
much. Yeah, this is tradition now, right? To do that. All righty. So we're going to sing the most theme song, but I want to warn you that there's a glitch with the video, what you're going to be seeing. And it's kind of like really outer spacey. So I'm just giving a warning in advance, but sing along. I've been to Romamu, I've been to BJ. I searched all over for a place to pray. That's pretty cool, isn't it? I found the mosh pit and knew that this was it. I am a Moshnik and I'm here to stay. Let's get down, Sarah. And I'm turning gray. I found community that is in tune with me, singing and dancing in the Zumagog. Everybody! Some contemplation mixed with elation. I am a Moshnik and I'm here to stay. And we're turning gray. A chance to meet you, a chance to greet you. Hi, Deborah Wexler. A time to deepen what it means to belong. Let's have some fun tonight and spread some joy and light. I am a Moshnik and I'm here to stay. And I'm turning gray. Take it away, Hoff! Hop the harmonica man! He's not even here and he's playing. All right, that's enough of that. Well, again, welcome everybody. Turning to chapter 4, I hope you have a pencil or pen and paper handy because we're going to be doing some written work this evening. And it's just some coming attractions that next week we will not be reading from the book Dan Glazer, but instead next week we will be led by our very own Shulamit, who's going to be leading a class in giving blessings. We're always giving blessings in our breakthrough room, and a number of people have asked, how do you do that? And so that's what we're going to do next Wednesday night. We're going to have a class learning how to give over a blessing. And also, I'll be teaching a little bit about the nature of blessings historically as well. The following week, Neil Meyerson, you have a question already? You're muted if you have a question, my friend. No, okay, you're just waving at us, all righty? The following, Dan Glazer, don't be a wise guy. Well, okay, fine. The following week, DDK, Devil Daniel Clipper, is going to be teaching with me on the theme of forgiveness. So that certainly fits right in to this. And then the week after, which is the week right before Rosh Hashanah, Mark Kronish, the other Mark's brother, is going to be co-leading with me a teaching about blowing shofar and listening to shofar. So everything, and it's Kabbalistic teachings on that and how to really dig deep when you listen to, and we'll even learn a little bit about how the Baal Tekiah, how the shofar blower is supposed to be thinking about during those times. But tonight, without further ado, I present to you chapter 4, Elul. If you notice in the very first page of chapter 4, and I'm in the Kindle, I'm on page 64. If anybody has a different page, put it in the chat, please, or just gesticulate feverishly towards me if we're way off from each other. You see the line at the end of the paragraph, you awake to confusion, where are you, who are you? And this, of course, he mentions this after hearing the ram's horn during this month of Elul, whether it be a whole note or a broken note. I was delighted the first time that I read his book because These words, who are you, where are you, are part of a song that came to me many, many years ago. I don't know, you might remember, Mary Rita, we actually used it at Moshe when we were together at the church one year right before High Holy Days in a session with Clea. And the lyrics, and maybe I'll sing it later on, are this is a time for returning to the one from where we come from. Who are you? Where are you? When will you be the one who you were meant to be? And we form two circles, one facing out and one facing in, and partners. Is ringing a bell, Mary Rita? And we sang it to each other. And then it'd be, who am I? Who are you? Who are we? And the lyrics changed like that. So if we have a little time at the end, I'll share that with you. Welcome, Ira Bracha. So this is the time to wake up. During Elul, the month before Rosh Hashanah, one should devote less time to study and more time to fixed periods of introspection and self-evaluation. Well, we're kind of doing both, aren't we? We're studying the book, but at the same time, I suspect that a number of you are involved in personal spiritual practices that are, in which you are seeking to unmask yourself. You know, that nikuda panimit inside of us, that place, that kernel of wholeness that never ever disappears, but remains able to be accessed. We can always go back there and we can learn from it and relearn about who we are in our essence. Who are you? When will you be the one who you were meant to be? So we're going to take a look now at the Parsha, and as always, please, I'd love this to be a conversation as opposed to a straight teaching, so if you have any questions or comments, reflections, don't hesitate, please. We just got through Parshat Re'eh. Remember how it begins? Look, I set before you, I put before you this day a blessing and a curse. Right? Psychospiritually, we understand this to mean that, first of all is God, right? All comes from God, the divine. And we have a choice to choose to go this way or that way. We're instructed to walk in God's path, but what does that mean? Perhaps it means to be more in touch with who we are and what our unique mission is in this lifetime, and following that path. But how do we know? The will of God. We're on the paragraph that starts with the message of this ritual was clear, and we're talking now about the ritual of the two mountains, right? Israelites are standing on one mountain and they're yelling out the blessings, and the Israelites are on the other mountain and they're yelling out the curses. This might remind you of Unatana Tokef when we reach that paragraph. And during Yamim Noraim, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, who shall live and who shall die, right? Well, let's face it, there are living and dying is not just in Asiya, in the physical realm, right? We can live and die emotionally, right? And we can be alive or we can be dead in Bria as well, in the world of intellect. The will of God is present in every moment, whether it be a moment of blessing or a moment of what feels like a curse. Every moment contains the capacity for good and evil, life and death, a blessing and a curse, and everything depends on our choice. On our choice. Now, we don't choose to become sick, so we're not going to go in that direction. But these choices, I think that he's referring to is, we've all come to many forks in the road along the way. And we've all had angels in our life giving us angelic messages of what to do, also what not to do, right? And as Yogi Berra would say, when you come to the fork in the road, take it. But who knows what the right direction is? Therefore, look, and this is from the text, I call heaven and earth to witness against you this day that I have set before you life and death, the blessing and the curse. Therefore, choose life so that you may live. And Moshe repeats this now in the book of Devarim, in the book of Deuteronomy. Remember, I think we mentioned this either on a Wednesday night or on Shabbos morning, that this construct of calling on heaven and earth to be witness, right? These were used in ancient times on large blocks of rock, where contracts were written on these. They were called steles, S-T-E-L-E. And they were carved out on the rock so that the people would know what the rules of this particular kingdom were and that they would follow them. And all of the repercussions for not following them as well were written on this stele. So in our text, in our sacred text, these steles probably predate, if you're going, of course, by the word just went out of my mouth. It's the hypothesis that how Torah was written. Somebody help me out here.
Friedman's book, Who Wrote the Bible?
No, it's not a book I'm looking for. It's a word. It's it'll come to me when I'm trying to think of it.
The hermeneutics?
No. It's a phrase, actually. It's not just one word. It's a something hypothesis. Deborah, you're shaking your head. I know, but you can't remember what it is.
Can't remember.
But basically, that the Bible, that our sacred text was written by people. The idea that Moshe went up to the mountain and downloaded everything from eternity is sacred myth, as far as my sense is. But if you talk to someone who is more orthodox leaning than I am, you're not going to get the same take on things as that. But in any case, if indeed it was handed down and then codified over these stories over a length of time, and some based upon things that happened, of course, before, they might have been taken from the idea of these steles and these contracts, where heaven and earth, there was always a witness. Who would be witness to these contracts? Who else to call on but the skies and the gods in the sky? But here in the Deuteronomic text, heaven and earth are called upon to witness the choices that we are going to have. We learn, continuing, a number of things, that this business of choosing good over evil, life over death, is precisely a matter of life and death. Our lives quite literally depend on it, and we learn that it is a matter of consciousness too, that sliver of eternity on which we stand and that we call the present moment. Of course, here Reb Lou is leaning on his Buddhist background and his Zen practices, right, of which he practiced both. And everything for him is going to make sense through both the lens of Chassidut, right, of psycho-spiritual understanding of the text, as well as his life before becoming a rabbi. We're on page 66 in the Kindle Meira. Okay. So because we have this choice, this is why we're advised to spend the month of Elul in the regular practice of introspection, self-examination, and silence. Turning to page 67. We must set aside. We must set aside each day of Elul to look at ourselves, to engage in self-evaluation and self-judgment, to engage in cheshbon hanefesh, literally a spiritual accounting, right? And when you're in a restaurant in Israel, at the end of the meal, you say cheshbon bavakasha, right? So cheshbon is the bill. So this is the accounting, right? The spiritual accounting. But we get very little way of practical advice about how we might do this. So that's what we're going to be spending the next few weeks on, which is how do we do the practice, and some tonight as well. So he makes the suggestion, starting with prayer. So the Hebrew word for prayer is what, somebody? Anybody? You're going to have to raise your hand and then unmute yourself. Dan.
Lahit palel.
Lahit palel. And in the grammar, what kind of verb is lahit palel?
Self-reflexive.
Exactly. It's a reflexive verb, which basically means that it is turning back on itself, right?
Palel means judge or um, uh, evaluate. So it's sort of self-evaluation, something like that, self-judgment. Is that not right?
That's correct. Right.
Hebrew for
But
400.
Hebrew, the reflexive form of the verb means a judgment, self-judgment. Right. Yeah. Neil, did you have a question? No. Okay. Keeps faking me out. So prayer, lahit palel, is one of the ways in which we do this work. And what, of course, is the work? There's the work of teshuvah. I mean, I don't think I'm sure he said the word yet in this chapter. But it doesn't have to be fixed prayer. It doesn't have to be prayer from our prayer book. Although, if you are familiar with the prayer book, it will work that way. You know, some people complain, somebody told me that they went to shul last week on a Friday morning and it was boring. because, right? Because they do this, he said, because they do the same thing every day. Well, no. You know, I actually find comfort in that, not having to guess. You know, the renewal way of doing things is also comforting. And also what it does for me is it creates a balance, like the rabbis initially were talking about in the Talmud, that our prayers should be a combination of keva, fixed prayer, and kavanah, right? Of intentional prayer, of improvisational prayer. It should be just like a good jazz piece where the theme is laid out, the melody, and then you start improvising. That's not what we do when we go to shul for the most part. Meira.
So I had taken a class, I can never pronounce it, Hitbodadut, I believe that's what it is.
Yes, that's where I'm going with this. Great.
Oh, you are? Okay, because I said that I did that practice last year, and I felt like that was one of the most powerful practices that I've ever done. It was like I surprised myself. I didn't know what it was, and it was different every time. It was always different, but it was always like, oh, I guess that's what needed to come out, or, you know, that kind of thing. It was that kind. Sometimes I could chat away for 20 minutes, and other times I just wanted to sit in silence. It was really interesting.
Beautiful. So can you give us a one-line description of what Hitbodadut is?
So it's a practice where you actually have a conversation with God, and you try to make it the same time if you can, so that you really get into a practice of it. I light a candle, and I say a prayer, and then I put on the timer for 10 minutes and just see what comes out. I always have a journal with me to write down things. And
great! What a beautiful practice that you have created for yourself. So Hitbodadut, also like lahit palel, is a reflexive verb. The root of the verb is boded, to be alone. So this is prayer when you're alone that works on yourself, and it is a conversation, beautiful if it is a conversation, because meaning that you're having a tete-a-tete with divinity. Wow. That's fantastic. Dan.
Do I understand correctly that with Hitbodadut, you're not using any liturgy?
That's correct.
It's just your own words.
Although, let's just back up on that for a second. If liturgy should come to you during your self-expression, by all means, you should follow the bend in the river wherever it takes you. I would like to live like the river flows.
Okay.
Right? So it can have traditional prayer in it, but it's not planned. Right? If something rises up, then it's there, and you pay attention to it, and you allow it to be. But it is, in the end, a kind of prayer. It is prayer. I'm going to say a kind of. It is prayer in which you are having a conversation with divinity in the same way that you would if you were praying with a fixed liturgy. Welcome, Gail, and welcome, Mel. And Stephen, too. Me'ira bracha. Speaking of blessings.
Unmute. Okay. So thank you for bringing this up. I took spiritual direction as an olive course, and we learned a lot of things, including about prayer. And when we were learning Hitbodedut, we were directed to go outside into the woods and speak out loud privately to God there. And to me, that was such a revelation.
Yeah, beautiful. So thank you for adding that to it. It is, Reb Nachman teaches that you should go out into nature and to do that work. It's just a little more conducive than, being around everything that you know and being distracted. I saw another hand. No, okay. Many scholars believe that the root of this word comes from the Ugaritic verb for judgment, and the reflexive verb hitbalel originally must have meant to judge oneself. So we're on page 68. The naked truth of what we have done cannot be denied. Standing before God, we see ourselves whether we want to or not. So it's kind of like standing in front of a mirror, which is opaque, that you can reach through. You get that? They say that the prophets, they spoke to, and God spoke to them. But Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, is the only one who saw God through an espaklaria. I think I'm pronouncing it right. It's through with no veil, right? It's like I just said, like he could see himself, but he can look through the mirror and divinity would be looking at him at the same time. Aspaklaria. You can look it up. It's a pretty neat idea. So during the month of Elul, we're on page 69 now, at the end of the paragraph on prayer. So during the month of Elul, one of the times we can use to examine ourselves, to engage in self-assessment, is the time spent in communal prayer. We can either devote more time to this activity, or if we already pray quite regularly, now we can do so with a more focused intention to have our praying become tefillah, in the original sense, an act of self-judgment, an opportunity to see ourselves more clearly. So another thing I want to just remind us all is that this month of Elul, we engage in really intense individual work. And then when we hit Rosh Hashanah, it all becomes we, especially on Yom Kippur. Shechatanu lefanecha, that we have sinned before you. We. And some of us now add a positive version of that, of confessing our deeds, as our good deeds as well, so that we can see ourselves perhaps in that way too, through that lens, and carry that into the new year with us. We also remember that at the end of the paragraph, well, first of all, it starts in Tana Tokef. It starts with, the angels on high. I mean, they are freaking because, the shofar has sounded and they know what's coming. The whole world is about to be judged. V'hine yom hadin. Right here is the day of judgment. And then that goes into who shall live and who shall die. At the end of which we read utshuva, tefillah, tzedakah, right? And prayer and tzedakah and teshuva, they lessen the intensity of the decree, all right? They don't necessarily wipe it out, but they modify the original decree. So tefillah that we just got through, prayer, very important, because when we get to that line in Untanatana Tokaf, then you can go, I've been doing that work. Before we move on from prayer, I want to read to you, I've read this many times before, but I just love it so much. I want to read it again right now, which is Mary Oliver's poem on praying. And I sense this is that she never knew the word Hitbodedut, but this is what it might have a taste of. Praying. It doesn't have to be the blue iris. It could be weeds in a vacant lot or a few small stones. Just pay attention. Then patch a few words together and don't try to make them elaborate. This isn't a contest, but a doorway into thanks and a silence in which another voice may speak. If you want to look it up for yourself, it's called Praying, Mary Oliver. And Meira, I'm hearing exactly what you were talking about, in that we pray spontaneously and then we wait. In that silence, if we are so graced, we have left the space for another voice to speak. Right? Who's on first? Yes. God is one, Echad. Let's stop for a moment and take a few seconds. Any reflections, any questions or thoughts that you want to open up before we move on to meditation? Please, Deborah.
I know it doesn't necessarily mean this literally, but the Unatana Tokef prayer, I haven't been able to say it since a very good friend of mine died many years ago. And I guess some of this, like, I do believe that we can change and become better people, but there's a lot of blaming out there in the world. And even blaming about people that get sick or have troubles. You did it, you caused it. So I just have issues with that. So it's hard for me.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. You raised two different issues, challenges. One is being able to say it in the wake of a death of someone close to us. The second part I'm not going to address, but that comment is totally understandable. My sense of Intana Tokef is not of a God who is sitting above us in white robes, pointing a finger, writing in the book of life, Sefer HaChaim, who shall live and who shall die. That's not the God I believe in. Reb Zalman of blessed memory warns us two different things. First of all, that most people have a pediatric understanding of God, which is what I just described. The second thing is that God doesn't work like a vending machine. We put our prayers in and out comes the good stuff. Exactly what we wanted. But all of that said, this year especially, I'm approaching the high holidays with just the knowledge that there is no certainty about anything. My mashpia, Estelle Frankel, wrote a beautiful, beautiful book, The Wisdom of Uncertainty. And in it, she deals with just this, that if you look at Untana Tokef in that paragraph, it's through a different lens. If you're looking at it, that this is life. Some live and some die. It might even be me, 222 in the next year. The Baal Shem Tov teaches that each of us have only so many words to speak in a lifetime, right? But all of those things that are mentioned are just things that happen, right? And we can't change what happens, but we can change how we approach it, what happened. And if we embrace all is God and know that we're in this together and that God will show up when someone knocks on your door and provides you with comfort, then I think that it provides us with a little better model for understanding Unatana Tokaf, and especially that paragraph. I see, Reb Sarah, you nodding with me. Yes, you had anything you would like to add to that? You don't have to. I was just wondering. No, okay. Meira?
Yeah, so another practice that I found very helpful that I wanted to share with the group would be to ask the question in that silence, what do I need to hear for my highest good and the highest good of others? And the wisdom that has come out for me is to listen to your body's wisdom, protect your health, open your heart, receive, intuit, act from a deep knowing by keeping your consciousness clear, be present and grateful for blessings, and love should guide all actions.
Beautiful. You're teaching a class on Hitbodedut, and it's so appreciated. What beautiful guidelines, and what a beautiful how instructive that is to go into this kind of prayer with an intention. In other words, go in with a question, right? We should always go into prayer with a question or a need or a yearning or something to give thanks for. I mean, those are the nature of the different prayers that we have. Hodaot, prayers of thanks. Bakashot, prayers of what we ask for things. Slichot, prayers of forgiveness, asking for forgiveness. And even on a weekday, we pound our chest for those of you who are familiar with that and have practiced that from time to time. So thank you again, Meira, for that.
Shosh and Moshe have their hand up.
Thank you, Dan. The check is in the mail.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. I reviewed several times the construct that on page 68, where if we in prayer we evoke God's presence or we're experiencing God, and then it makes it more difficult to engage in self-deception and highly selective interpretation. And I thought that was a really good reason to get into that space, because it's so easy to punt and lie to yourself.
Yeah, and absolutely, that's great. Thank you for lifting that up. The real self, the authentic self that's been hiding, the sign language for turtle, it's that, so it's hiding and then it creeps out. So that's what we tend to do. We're hiding behind all of these facades that have built up for such a long time. And what prayer, when it's working, what it does, it breaks down all of those facades, leaving us with the naked truth of ourselves. Right? It works, and so does meditation. Oh, thank you for that wonderful segue. So moving on to meditation. For those of us who have a meditation practice, we know that the same exact thing that you just described, Moshe, happens, right? That happens in prayer, where our defenses break down. They get stripped away. We let go and we let God, as the expression is, right? We open ourselves to more light. If we don't like what we see, we quickly crawl back like the turtle does. Sometimes it will scare us, what we see, and going deeper into that whatever frightens us, will shed more light on that. The klipa, the husk of what we've been hiding all of these years, or hiding behind, maybe that's better said, hiding from, hiding behind, all melt away, leaving us naked. And I shared with you all on Shabbat my conversation with my younger son about things that happened many, many years ago that I've been waiting and waiting and waiting and having this conversation. He's now 37. I was like, okay, no, it's time. But I did it for me. I did it for me. Once I had decided, once I had done the discernment that it was not just for me, the healing that was hopefully going to come about, and that it wasn't going to create a burden to him. Here, like throwing somebody a football. Here, you take it, right? Which brings us to the whole subject of forgiveness, when to ask forgiveness and who to ask it from, and whether that person needs to be open to it before you ask. We're not going there now. Stay tuned 2 weeks from tonight with DDK. All righty. So exactly, we're on page 70 now. The same phenomena we described in relation to prayer arise when we meditate. That moment of insight where, when we bear witness to the thoughts that have carried our awareness away. Wow, we bear witness to the thoughts that have carried our awareness away. In other words, these thoughts have put us to sleep. You know, insight meditation teachers will use this language too. This is an awakening that happens when we pray and when we meditate. We wake up to what is happening here right now, and as well as the baggage that we're carrying around with us. That moment when we come to know precisely what these thoughts are, precisely what it is that we aren't looking at, and so keep sneaking up on us and grabbing our attention, right? You know, because it's going to show its ugly face eventually. You know, the shadow that keeps on, trailing us is going to is going to be needed to be untangled eventually. And if we do that work, then we can sit under that shade tree and not be so intimidated and haunted by that shadow. So we're turning to page 71. This is the essential aspect of Rosh Hashanah, seeing ourselves as not just a discrete ego, but as part of the great flow of being. The very first thing the Talmud has to say about Rosh Hashanah is, on Rosh Hashanah, all the inhabitants of the earth stand before God, all of the inhabitants. As it says in 33rd Psalm, God fashions their hearts as one and discerns all their actions together. Right? We are the world. You know, it's a little cheap, but it is true that if you again here on Shabbos morning, I think that's when I talked about Reb Zalman's dream that he shared with Reb Tirza Firestone about a few months before he died. Remember that, anybody? He's sitting in a hot tub. Remember the dream I talked about? I'll remind you, he's sitting in a hot tub with a number of interfaith leaders around the edge of the hot tub, sitting with him, and everybody's has their arms connected around each other. Well, that is unity, but then he notices underneath the water, everybody's legs are intertwined with each other. In the place that we can't see, right? In the place that's underneath, in that thin line, right? That's permeable when we open ourselves up to the Adonai Echadness of life, of this world, of this reality. So that's what happens. We get to Rosh Hashanah. It's all about we, Moshe or Shosh. Nope, you're just chatting amongst yourselves?
No, I'll take it. Actually, it was a mistake that was still up, but I'll take it because did you say? Oh, okay. So I just wanted to add one thing before we get too far off of your comment about with meditation, let go and let God. And sometimes it can be scary, but it also sheds light. I'm trying to work my way through this book this month. on Psalm 27, right? It's the Psalm of the month, right?
Yep, who wrote it?
This is by Rabbi Deborah J. Robbins. It's just beautiful. She parses every phrase out and goes into different aspects of it. And she talks about, may I read just one little phrase from it?
Please.
Okay, good. And she's talking, and this is really from the first phrase that starts, Adonai is my light and my victory. She talks about yoga. And she says, holding a pose often leads to trembling. Breathing and continuing to hold the pose builds strength. I am reminded, feel no shame. Shaking is an indication of growth, not a sign of weakness. Over time, the shaking lessens and the stillness lengthens. And then it's time to move on to a different pose, a different encounter, and begin the cycle over again.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Reb Zalman invited his students to spend 7 seconds on each word of the Amidah. Not every day, obviously, but as a practice to just investigate with curiosity what happens. And so I'm reminded of that because that too is like an asana. It's a pose. It's a posture we take. And there are even postures that we take physically, but it's a posture that we take when we're standing before God, Shiviti, and praying with text as opposed to with physical embodiment. On page 72, I think this is a really nice invitation. Choose one simple and fundamental aspect of your life and commit yourself to be totally conscious and honest about it for the 30 days of Elul. I think that this simplifies, like, what do I do? When there seem to be so many spiritual practices, right? To choose one midah, one characteristic, right? That either needs to be strengthened or that needs to really be looked at with great discernment. There was one time in my life when I wasn't as generous financially as I am now. And my beloved wife, Renee, was my teacher about that. And I've often given that a lot of thought. Now, what's that about, right? Because there are times when my reflex, those grooves get set in the record. That is me a long time ago. And though they become habits. So when those moments arise, now I have a break on it. When I am, remember this last parsha, we to open your hand to the needy, right? Well, you can't open your hand to everyone, can you? And we make decisions about, who on the street to hand money to, whether to or not. I used to have a practice of carrying little peanut butter, those crackers around in my car. So when we came down the exit ramp and there was that guy standing there or the woman standing there with a sign, I didn't have to ignore them. That I could treat them as a human being, open my window and say, God bless, I don't have any money, or I don't usually give people money, but sometimes I do, and hand them something, a cracker. Remember, that's also that teaching, that Baal Shem teaching from this past Shabbos. Doing a lot of referring back to some teachings I gave this last Shabbat. So what would it be for you? What is one, and this is not a rhetorical question, my friend. What is one aspect of yourself that needs work? And you don't have to share it out loud. But one aspect of yourself that you would like to grow or change. And the curriculum for Elul is to now be aware when that comes up and to watch it and notice it. Because like he says, a lot of this is about intention and noticing when things happen. We walk through life asleep. The shofar wakes us up, right? Wake up! I don't blow mine till 9 a.m. usually in the morning, so I'm not waking up any neighbors, but. Some things that we can do mindfully. Choose one. It could be a midah or it could be an action. Mindful eating, right? I was talking to someone the other day. He belongs to Overeaters Anonymous, right? He deals with that mindfully in a group. When I'm gardening, I'm usually I'm in heaven. But I'm also, I'm usually thinking about Torah, and I'm the Torah of the garden, right? How weeds grow wherever they can sprout up, and that happens to us too. And we pick them out, and then they return back right through at a different place when we weren't looking. But in other places, we planted the seeds, which is also what prayer is about. We plant the seeds for awakening. And then we water them, we cultivate, and then all of a sudden, well, not all of a sudden, we have a tomato, or we have, like I picked today, beets and kale, and they were yummy. God is in the garden. We do it while making music, or listening to music, or or painting, right? There's that moments of stillness that when we allow ourselves to be conscious that, here it is, that's where divinity kind of like, hello, I'm here. And that's to where we are more often than not, stuff comes to the surface that needs to be dealt with, all right? So mindfulness and meditation, all about stopping hiding. Any comments, questions before we move on? Neil.
We should only eat until we are satiated.
Yes, isn't that beautiful? And did he say somewhere in here that we should practice not eating at lunchtime? Was it him that said it, or did I read it someplace else? But we should eat when we're hungry.
Yes.
Right? I actually tried that today. Yeah, I don't have such a fixed schedule, so I'm lucky. I don't have a lunch hour. People with real jobs, I understand, have that. But today I tried. It was great. I didn't look at the clock and say, oh, it's this time. It's time to eat because I ate breakfast. No, I just waited till I was hungry, and then we're making lunch. I like that. Yeah, thanks for reminding me about that, Neil. That was
a good one.
Yeah, that's a great part of my day. Shov Team, that is this week's Parsha, and it begins on page 76. We're going to very quickly take a look at that, and then we're going to do some written work. Parsha Shoftim, page 77, we read during the first or second week of the month of Elul. So since Rosh Chodesh Elul was last Shabbat, we're reading in the second week. Begins with what seems like a simple prescription for the establishment of a judicial system. Judges and officers, shoftim v'shotrim, you shall appoint for yourselves in all your gates. But Chassidut, not going to let that lie. It's all about making a government and police officers, to hold people to the law. The commentary reading is a kind of mindfulness, right? It's an imperative. According to the Iturei Torah, there are 7 gates, right? We just read that you shall appoint yourself judges and officers in your gates. So what are the gates? What are the 7 windows to the soul? 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 nostrils, and a mouth. Goes in, comes out, comes in, comes out. We're just talking about eating, right? Eating mindfully. Everything that passes into our consciousness must enter through one of these gates: our eyes, our ears, our nostrils, our mouth. So at the deepest level, the passage cited above has nothing to do with the establishment of judges and courts, but rather deals with being mindful of the process of consciousness. Right? What we say, what we hear, how we process what we hear, what we see, how we judge, how we process what we see, etc. What we smell, good or bad, pleasant or not, making judgments with our nose, all of the above. So these are the gateways. We are the judges. We are holding ourselves to a higher purpose. If what we see things for as they are, and here's going to come my really quick understanding of Avodah Zarah, which is idol worship. One of my understandings. My understanding of idol worship is this, that I have a good friend, Deborah Lesk. I've known Deborah Lesk for 40 years. Actually, I haven't known her. I've known her for maybe 40 months. Right? But I have a good friend. Call her Deborah, not Lesk, right? I've known this person for a long time. As a matter of fact, he lives down the street. We grew up together, and we've worked together. We've played together. I know this person. And every time I see this person, I just know they're going to behave in a certain manner. I know what they're going to say. I know what songs are their favorite. I know what brings out the best of them and the worst. And everything that I know, I act them and I treat them in that manner. That's Avodah Zarah to me, idol worship. And what I mean by that is, when we see each other as unchanging, we box each other in, and there's not possible for growth in either one of us, how I see you or how you are in the world. That to me is the worst kind of worship, idol worship, not IDLE, IDOL. But maybe idol worship, it's when I get lazy about our friendship. I think I know you, right? But, you know, I really don't know everything about you. In the same way, we don't know everything about ourselves. We're shifting our gaze from the world itself to the window through which we see it, because that window, the screen of our consciousness, is not just a blank, transparent medium. Rather, it is a world unto itself, a world teeming with life. That life affects what we see. We're on page 77.
Elizabeth and Richard had their hand up.
Well, it's not up now.
Well, okay, they lost their chance.
That's now the moment passed by.
Yeah, I guess.
Okay, so please, slicha. That means I'm sorry. Forgive me. I'm not sure I understand this paragraph. If you would help me.
Which one?
I'm on page 77, what I just read. I'll start from the beginning of the paragraph. The essential act of the high holiday season is teshuvah. I know what that means. A turning toward mindfulness, and an important step in this process, a kind of turning in to examine our perceptive mechanisms, the way we see the world. Now remember, this is in the wake of that paragraph about the 7 gateways. This is the line I don't quite know if I understand. It is a shifting of our gaze from the world itself to the window through which we see it, because that window, the screen of our consciousness, is not just a blank, transparent medium. Rather, it is a world unto itself, a world teeming with life, and that life affects what we see. And because that life makes us see the world differently, the first step in teshuvah is to look at the window itself. Help? Anybody? Go ahead, Rick.
Well, what I know about the brain and consciousness and the way we perceive the world is that we actually don't perceive the world, we interpret the world. We're constantly interpreting what is coming in. And the reality is also that there's maybe at any one moment 40 million things we can attend to at any one moment in our perceptual field. We can't, our brain can't process that. So we have to continually be selective in what we perceive and exclude a whole bunch. And we always will be, and because of our past experience, we tend to zero in on certain things that feel familiar. We tend to interpret the same thing as things like things in the past, and we stop seeing, in a sense, because we're not really freshly coming to it with innocent eyes.
Thank you. So
Make
in
sense?
a way, it's like what I was just describing about idol worship, about not
I
coming,
think so.
Yeah.
coming to things with a fresh, not subjective, but just seeing the world and taking it in. Yeah, Elizabeth, and then I see other hands.
So I want to add to that. My understanding is it's actually focusing on our consciousness, on the quality of our awareness, and that may be a clear glass, or it may be one that's clouded with assumptions, expectations, cravings, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much for helping to clarify this. And all of those things that you just named, Elizabeth, are things that we should have brakes on. In other words, when those things arise, that we're not doing that, when we are not seeing the world clearly, but rather bringing our preconceptions and prejudgments to it, when we're aware of that happening, stop! In the name of love.
So the thing that I was wanting to speak to before sort of fits in here as well. That for me, sometimes the challenge, it was around choosing one thing to focus on. And for me, well, should it be this or this or this or this or this or this? And so even that requires entering into prayer in a way, and the beautiful kind of guidance you were sharing, Mira, that allows that I don't choose, but I actually offer it up and invite God to help me choose.
Beautiful. What a beautiful reminder. Thank you so much. That if you don't know what the thing is, pray on it. Right?
Yeah.
Or sit in silence. It will arise. Right? It will arise. But you have to ask for it. And that's what I meant before about having the intention before you go into the prayer. Linda.
Good evening. The example that came to mind first was being with other people, and some people see a situation as a glass half empty and others see it as a glass half full. And if you only see it in one way all the time, that's the experience you'll always have. So part of the experience of Elul for me is trying to maybe not change my perception, because everybody thinks, oh, I know what's right for me, or just being able to loosen up enough to see somebody else's.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you. Pencil and paper, everybody? I am fighting the urge to tell a short story on the pessimist and the optimist, and because you were just reminded me. So if we have a little time at the end, I'll share that too. All righty. I'm sharing this as part of an annual spiritual checkup that was published by Rabbi Hillel Goldman in, I think it was like in the synagogue bulletin of B'nai Or in Vancouver years ago. And I like some of these. So they're all fill in the blank sometimes, or they're questions sometimes. And I will send this out to all of you. Let me take a screenshot of who was here so that you have all of the questions if you want to work with them. But here's a few. My spirit soars when. Take a minute. My spirit soars when. And if I be so bold to say the answer to that question, what you write there is pointing you in the direction of you, of your neshama, with its unique DNA. My spirit soars when. Next question, and you should feel free to complete this on your own if you have more to write. The hardest part of my relationship or lack of relationship with the divine is the hardest part of my relationship or lack of with the divine is so this is a question that a spiritual directee might take up with his or her or their spiritual director or spiritual companion. If you don't have one, this is a question to take up in prayer with your God, whatever the relationship or not relationship is. It's a perfect question to take into Hitbodedut. You know, I got some questions for you, or I've got something I need to tell you. So these first two questions are questions underneath a column of my relationship with God. The next two questions are under my relationship with others. And there's more than these two, but let's just do these two. One way in which, I'm modifying that a little bit. One way in which I am too harsh on myself is, one way that I am too harsh on myself is and the second question, you probably can anticipate, one way in which I am too harsh on others or on an other, if a specific relationship comes up, is, so one is harsh on yourself, and the second is being harsh on others or someone else. And finally, in a column, my relationships with Jewish practice and observance. I feel most comfortable, I'm going to add at home, with these aspects of Jewish practice and observance. I feel most comfortable at home with these aspects of Jewish practice and observance. Now, I'm not going to use the word belief because we try not to use that, but if you want to use theology and add that to that, that might be instructive too. I feel most comfortable with these aspects of Jewish practice, observance, and theology. And I know I'm perhaps not giving you enough time, but you can work on these on your own. And finally, the aspects, you know where I'm going now, the aspects of Jewish practice, observance, and theology that I feel most resistant to are the aspects of Jewish practice, observance, and theology that I feel most resistant to are Gail, maybe we can get together sometime in private. I'd be, or if you have anything to reflect on before we're done. Gail, most of you know, is a Ger Toshav in our midst. Gail is not Jewish, but she likes hanging out with us and has found a spiritual home here. Reb Zalman was very much for taking it easy with people who are interested in converting. Let them hang out first. And that might not ever be on your plate, Gail. But we are grateful that you're here and lending your unique lens to our holy community. Okay. So those are 6 questions in 3 different categories. There are a lot more, and I'm going to send this to you. You'll see that I kind of modified 1 or 2 of the questions. Any of you would like to share anything about this process? This is, kind of like doing Musar work, following up questions with writing, and that the writing takes us deeper into, kind of like separating the chaff from the wheat, looking behind, seeing what's hidden underneath. All the time being honest, because no one's ever going to see this except for you and God, or anyone you want to share it with. So doing this work in Chavruta can be very powerful. Doing it with a partner, right? Someone you trust, someone you feel safe with. Anyone have anything you'd like to share? Not necessarily about these specific questions, unless you'd like to. But about this work that we just did. I'm going to take this that you are all so moved by the experience that you're struck awe about what you experienced. I'm not being facetious. Some things are not really to unpack in a whole group, but Deborah Lesk has something to share. Go ahead, Deborah, and then Carol Ann.
First of all, I've missed a lot because my internet is horrible tonight, but I did hear the questions, and a couple of them were questions I was just asking myself today. So I think that they're very good questions. I actually answered them today too. But so from my perspective, they're really good questions, and it's a good process.
Yeah, thank you. And I think if you talk to writers, talk to writers. Natalie Goldberg talks about this all the time. I don't know if any of you are familiar with her. She wrote a seminal book called Writing Down the Bones many years ago. You're shaking your head, yes. And to the place that we go when we write. Dan?
Yeah, well, I was intrigued, if it's okay, to get back to what you were mentioning about idol worship and what that means. And I guess the certainty of something, we're sure about the other person. Like you said, how they're going to act. And so you don't give them any opportunity to grow, to change, to be different. And the same thing with yourself. So in a sense, there should be only one certainty, which is the oneness, and everything else we need to be open to and not Because if we're so set in our ways or certain about something, that's an idol, that's something set in stone that really shouldn't be.
Thank you, Stan. Yes, I'm with you. Coming in for a landing here, Linda, then Carol Ann, briefly, please.
I want to thank you for the questions. The class was perfect for me tonight. It'll be my last one with you because I leave for Israel on Monday. So I am taking this with me as
Wow.
part of my Elul practice. And I'm really excited to be going for the first time as a bat mitzvah. So I've not slept through the night for 3 weeks because I'm just beside myself, as that expression goes.
How
Which is
wonderful.
interesting because I'm a Gemini, so there's a lot going on in my head.
Nasiya Tova, it should be just a blessed, safe, and heart-opening trip. And hope you run into our friend Ruth Gon Kagan, Rabbi Ruth, who is the spiritual leader of Nava Tehillah, a very
Yes.
special community. Carol Ann,
Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'm unmuted.
yes, you are.
Yeah. Thank you for this evening. I feel greatly at ease with these questions. And I think that because of my coming to Moshe for the last several years, it really has helped because of the breakthrough groups that we become more tuned into ourselves. This is a very special community of people who are working, I think, a lot on their spiritual growth. So I think that these questions will probably be more likely to be easier to answer than in a lot of other places and a lot of other people. Amen.
Thank you, Carol Ann. Amen. I am Rabbi Mark Novak, and I approve of that message.
And he didn't pay me to say it.
Well, the check is in the mail. So quickly, before we bid adieu, my friends, here's the story about the optimist and the pessimist. Talk about seeing life, through different lenses, right? So the king has twin sons. And one is an eternal optimist and one's an eternal pessimist. And this drives the king crazy. And the king, as the twins' birthday is approaching, he's knocking his brains out what to get them until finally it occurs to him. He's going to get each of them the perfect gift that's going to spin their world around so that they react in a different manner than they usually do. Maybe a little more balanced in their lives. So he goes to his trusted servant and he says, I want you to go to the royal barn and collect a whole pile of manure. And when my son, the optimist, is sleeping, sneak into his bedroom and put it at the foot of his bed. Okay, I'll do that. You're the king. And wait, I have another thing I need you to do. For my son, the pessimist, I want you to buy the most beautiful gold watch in the kingdom. Have it inscribed with his name. And have little people dancing on it as the hands go round and round. I'll get to work on that quickly. And so that's what the trusted advisor does. And sure enough, the night before the kid's birthday, he sneaks into their bedrooms and he puts the pile of manure at the foot of the bed of the optimist, and he puts the gold in a little beautiful box, the gold watch, at the foot of the bed of the eternal pessimist. The next morning, each of the children wake up, and the king hears a loud scream. He rushes, he knows he's done it. He rushes into the bedroom of the pessimist, and he sees the pessimist looking down at the gold watch with the biggest frown that he could possibly wear. What's wrong? He asks his son. I can never, ever, ever have this watch. It is bound to be lost. I'm such a nudnik. Or I might drop it and it'll break. It's just terrible, terrible, terrible thing for a birthday present. Oh, that didn't work. At the same moment, he hears a screech from his other son's room, and he rushes in to find his son. He is plowed under that pile of manure, squealing with delight. The king is totally perplexed. Everything is going wrong. When the son pops out from the pile of manure, he looks at the king joyful and he says, "You bought me a pony!"
There it is.
Thank you, Dan Glazer, for the rim shot. There you go. And sometimes we are the pessimists and sometimes we're the optimists. Maybe the invitation in the month of Elul is to pay attention to which we are and when, and not to let those grooves that we have been forming so long on our 45s of our life to remain the same for the rest of our lives. Thank you so much, everybody, for your holy presence. As we like to say at the end of these sessions,